Like this, you ever seen this movie Puss in Boots: The Last Wish?
Yes, bro.
So I talk about influences on this movie.
Okay.
Right on this movie right here, Sinners.
Okay.
That's a massive one. That
Puss in Boots?
Yeah.
On Sinners?
Think about the villain.
Death.
Think about his defining feature.
Oh, the eyes.
Yes.
Oh my God. Bro.
Yeah.
Ryan Coogler is proof that we are in a new generation of storytelling. And Sinners is too. For a long time, Hollywood and production studios have stuck to a relatively safe, predictable formula when it comes to genres and releases. Movies stay within their lane and then draw from movies that are older that are also in their lane. Nostalgia makes money, and that is why every movie has to be the 15th entry of an existing IP, or the prequel of an existing IP, or the spin-off of an existing IP. But the greatest thing about this new wave of directors, Coogler included, is their unabashed love for the work that has inspired them. Anime and animation is everywhere now. Serious creatives love animation.
I loved the Akira slide too.
I got to do it, man.
So good.
Oh my God.
I'm as serious a fantasy author as they come, but the cover art for my 5th book, Imperius, is literally just the Akira slide, but as a dragon. Coogler is 38. He grew up watching the same landmark foundational fiction and creators that many of us millennials did. Miyazaki, Tarkovsky, Toriyama, and the list goes on. But that doesn't mean he closes himself off from the value that the classics can offer either. Much to the contrary, actually. A little-known episode of The Twilight Zone called The Last Rites of Jasper Myrtlebank is a huge inspiration for Sinners, and that came out in 1962. Stephen King's vampire novel The Salem Lot might be the biggest inspiration for Sinners, and that came out in 1975. The structure of Sinners and its narrative core are born from Coogler having both the bravery and the talent to merge several different genres and styles of storytelling into a unique stunner that we really haven't seen before. And that made me want to make this video because I want to dive into the collage of inspirations and writing choices that makes Sinners so great. Some are obvious, while others are a bit more understated, but all of them add up to create an insanely unique narrative experience. For those of you who don't know, I'm Alex. I've been a novel and script editor for going on a decade now, and there's nothing I love more than geeking out about fiction and hopefully helping people learn as I do it. If you're interested in working with me yourself, head on over to my website to see my editing rates and services. Lastly, I have 5 fantasy books available for purchase on my website and a whole channel dedicated to the lore and background of my books using hand-drawn art, no AI. I'd love for you all to check it out, link below. But the first thing to do is to look at Sinners here from an objective script assessment perspective, and we can start with the opening. Sammy rolls up to the church, bloodied and with a broken guitar. The congregation screams, and the pastor beckons him in, urging Sammy to drop the guitar and repent of his ways. There are no vampires. There is no violence. Everything is implied and below the surface. It's a phenomenal way to start a horror movie, and it's also tried and true. This scene takes great inspiration from the horror classic Jaws. Here again, we don't see the danger. There isn't real violence on screen. Everything is quite literally below the surface. But what this does is set the stage for the horror that will come. It prepares us for it, and it makes us want to see it. Narratively, this is called the hook. It's a promise of the tension to come, and this is important because Sinners, like many horror movies, has an Act 1 pretty much absent of horror. It's all set up. Without the hook, we may not even know we are watching a horror movie for a while. But where Coogler diverts from tradition is making the hook the present time and turning the rest of the movie into a flashback. This technique is called in media res, which literally means in the middle, so the story catches back up to where we started. You'll often see this in comedies or animated films, so it's cool that Coogler has twisted it into a more dramatic version here.
This is me. I think it's apparent I need to rethink my life a little bit. What's my problem? First of all, I'm a rat.
This hook frames the rest of the movie in mystery because Sammy will live and be bloodied, but we don't know why or how. The whole movie becomes this puzzle that has to fit back into the hook at the start. And speaking of the rest of the film, as a whole, it's not traditional. Typically, scripts and stories are written in a 3-act structure. This is pretty common. The acts are introduction, midsection, and climax resolution. This is not always the case, but the most common. Still, I have written a full book in 4-act structure and have worked with clients who have submitted wonderful 2-act manuscripts for me to edit. But Sinners goes even further. Sinners is actually written in a 5-act structure. The hook we just discussed is part of the introduction. And like the name would suggest, the introduction is the part of the plotting where the characters and their struggles are introduced. This is where Sinners does a great job of adhering to the more fundamental structures of typical narratives. We meet Sammy and pretty much immediately learn about his love for music. We also soon get his conflict, which then allows us to immediately relate to him. For those who don't know, conflict in narratives is defined as whatever is standing in the way of the character achieving their goal. Well, that would be Sammy's father, at least at the beginning. Sammy loves his father and family, but Sammy's father is convinced that nothing good can come from a musician's life, at least outside of the church. So with that established, we are automatically set up to expect that the rest of the movie will be exploring Sammy trying to prove his father wrong, trying to work to make music work. Act 1 also includes the introduction of Smoke and Stack, and the film does a great job of demonstrating their characteristics through their actions early on. They spend a whole lot of money to buy property in their first scene, and they confidently stand up to a racist to do it. This again immediately informs us of their skills and outlooks, while also working to make them likable and relatable. And just like Sammy, the narrative makes sure to build in mystery into their storyline, though through a different method. While we learned a ton about Sammy, his background, his struggles, and we wonder how it connects to the hook, we learn pretty much nothing about the twins early. This creates additional mystery as to what exactly they're doing and how they're doing it, mystery that will last across nearly the entirety of the film. This actually signals the end of Act 1 and brings us into Act 2, the midsection. The midsection of any narrative is where both the characters and the conflict are deepened. This is where we are meant to learn of backstories, hang-ups, motivations, and more. But for Sinners, the second act is where the movie fully steps away from horror, at least for a time, and becomes a period piece focused on a heist narrative. What I mean by this is that the entire second act of Sinners is based around gathering a crew for a big mission. This is a very famous narrative trope, but one that is not often explored in relation to Black people and entrepreneurship, especially so in the pre-modern South.
Sanchez, you son of a bitch.
Never thought I'd see Angie Flint picking ticks off a pig.
Nobody's hiring an ex-con with fake hands to build an ion engine.
Suppose I had a job that didn't care if you've done time or whatever's going on with your confusing ass hands.
I'm in.
It's disguised rather well, but all of Act 2 is meeting individuals with specific special skills or resources and convincing them to complete a mission.
We're gonna need 2 precision drivers. Guys that don't crack under pressure. Guys that never lose.
You know we got that.
Usually these types of narratives completely ignore race or culture and are more focused on existential threats or a grand prize at the end.
Expect no mercy, show no mercy. You fight or you die.
But this is what makes Sinners so unique. Its structure allows it the perfect excuse to dive into the unique talents and skills that Black folk had as part of their community. This is what makes the second act still function as a period piece. There really isn't even a conflict. The focus of the story is simply putting these characters and their society underneath a microscope. This is why there will be moments of almost Tarantino-esque dialogue, probably another inspiration.
I don't tip.
You don't tip?
No, I don't believe in it.
You don't believe in tipping?
You know what these chicks make? They make shit.
You might remember a scene where Smoke hires a little girl to look after his truck, and then he insists that she haggle with him on the price.
Now, 10 cents just won't work for you. Talk another number back to me.
50 cents.
20 cents. Best I can do. We got a deal? Good. Jump in.
Another more traditional film might have brought that haggling into the climax, such as haggling with Remick over the people who would be killed, or turned, or let free. This is commonly known as Chekhov's gun in writing. When something in a story is shown, it's often pivotal later. But Sinners doesn't do that. Smoke doesn't haggle for a narrative reason, he haggles because it is true to his character and the experience of black entrepreneurs in the 1930s. But Sinners is also incredibly well made when considering the decisions that go along with its character pacing. What I mean is that across the recruitment phase of the second act, Smoke and Stack were split up. This was super smart because it actively avoids a trope that many fictions either purposely or accidentally fall into. See, most stories with twins treat the twins as basically one character. They kind of blend together and their unity becomes their key trait.
That's right. We can do that ourselves. I'm 6'5", 220, and there's two of me.
I'm with this guy.
Whatever. I'm saying let's calm down until we know what we're talking about.
How much more information are you waiting for?
Which is fine. But for Sinners, Smoke and Stack were very different and served different narrative purposes. So to make their distinctions as easy for the viewing audience to understand as possible, the twins were split up so their character traits could be shown on their own and therefore be more easily differentiated. Smoke was alone and went to handle the more serious narrative business. He went to recruit the shop owners and meet the mother of his dead child. We got to see how he handles business, but also how he handles romance. Stack, on the other hand, got to deal with much more lighthearted narrative elements, such as recruiting Delta Slim, Cornbread, and beefing with his ex-girlfriend, which all work for his character. Keep in mind, the entire second act has nothing to do with horror. It's so divested from horror that it almost starts to act like its own standalone film. Coogler certainly recognized this and decided to do something very non-traditional to answer. Have a second hook. When everyone has been recruited, the second act ends with Remic's introduction. His hook progresses much the same way that Sammy's does. He is mysteriously hurt as he enters the scene and is seeking safety through others. After probably an hour of a period piece, this is what transitions us back into horror. Then the third act begins at the Juke, and when it does arrive, it evolves what has been put in motion by the second act. If the second act was an exploration of black diversity, entrepreneurship, and ingenuity, the third act is a celebration of all those things. This is where many of the relationships come to a head, and a further deepening of every character happens. And again, Coogler borrows from outside his genre to accomplish this. The third act is structured just like a party movie. Think of Project X or Superbad, or even Death at a Funeral. It's all about juggling multiple perspectives all at once, all in the same location, who have technically interconnecting journeys, but are journeying across them separately to evolve separately. Act 3 continues all the way up until Mary kills Stack, and then Act 4 is ushered in. And Act 4 is when the horror returns swiftly and in full force. Coogler again borrows from many inspirational sources here. We have classic horror shining through, such as when the group wonders if any of them have turned. This channels John Carpenter's The Thing wonderfully. The storyline of unholy unity channels The Exorcist.
It would bring us together. You and Reagan. You and us.
Along with corrupting a kind, gentle soul.
You're gonna die up there.
We're gonna kill every last one of you.
And of course, with the vampires just outside, classics like Jaws and Alien, where the monster is just feet away at all times, provide their power. But once the vampires are invited inside, the fifth act arrives, and it has much more modern inspirations. The final moments are all action horror, reminiscent of A Quiet Place or The Last of Us, or even Daybreakers from 2009, which I guess is a little bit older. And like many narratives including monsters such as The Witcher, Sinners ends up showing that humans are the real monsters, or at least just as monstrous. Smoke's final enemies aren't vampires, it's the Klan. I truly believe this is Coogler's attempt to bring the narrative back to a more race-explorative place, especially since Remick was so convinced that race blindness was the proper way to live.
Well, now you must have me confused. I'm sad as all, but I don't need no saving.
Yes. Yes, you do. You all do.
And of course, we return to where The Hook left us, showing that Sammy persevered through his trials to stick with music and succeeded in it. Sinners may seem relatively straightforward on a first viewing because of how simple its central storyline is, but now hopefully its complexity can be properly appreciated. Coogler and the rest of the creative team was able to combine a truly astonishing number of genres and inspirational fictions into the narrative of Sinners, and the final product ended up becoming greater than the sum of its already great parts. If you want to continue to learn more, make sure to subscribe and comment. And if you want me to dissect your work like I dissected this here, head on over to my website to give me a hire. Lastly, make sure to check out my books, including my new release, Imperius, and subscribe to my new channel, Blood of One's Blood series, to learn all about my world and world building. As always, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you all again soon.